You should stop and explain why you would recommend that people don't vote tomorrow.
Well, I mean, it's kind of humiliating to beg for something you're never going to get. You know, the politicians are never going to care about any particular individual. Of course, statistically, it's completely meaningless, and you're not going to affect anything whatsoever, except you're going to have this unclean sort of dog crap smell on your fingers for a couple of weeks that no amount of moral scrubbing is going to take off. They don't listen to you. They don't respond to you. It is a sucker's game to get you to come in to validate the system. To validate what it is. You choose the lesser of two evils, and let's say you just think Obama is like 98% evil and Romney is 97% evil. Well, Romney doesn't know that. I mean, all he knows is you gave him a vote. He might, he's going to assume that you think he's 100% good. You don't get to say, well, I hate both of these guys, but this is the guy I hate least. So it's a positive action. You are endorsing a candidate. You are endorsing a system. You are endorsing a whole political process. And dear God in heaven, we claim to be empiricists. We claim to be historically interested and accurate. We have been trying as a movement since the mid-18th freaking century to control the size and growth and power of the state through participation in the political process. Can we get our heads out of our asses long enough to take a big, broad, hyperspectrum, high space, deep nine, side of the moon look at the whole pattern and recognize that ever since we have been trying to control the government using the government from the corn wars, the corn laws, from the free trade movements of the 18th century, from the founding of the American Republic, we've been trying to rein in this beast using this beast's own tail, and it never works, and the government keeps getting bigger. In the 40 years since the founding of the American Libertarian Party, the government has grown about 6 to 8 times its in size, not necessarily even counting all of the accumulated debt and the deficits.
Are you sure you want to blame the Libertarian Party for that too?
I'm not blaming it. I'm not saying that it's entirely causal, although, of course, what happens is if you have something that doesn't work and you don't know it, you stop looking for other things, right? So if you're confidently going through the woods saying, I know north is where the town is, and north is actually where the desert is, then you are in big trouble because you're confidently striding off in the direction of wrongness. And so I really strongly urge people, let's stop assuming that it's politics and education. That's all you ever hear from libertarians for the most part. Well, you see, we get involved in the political process. Now, we know we're not going to get anyone in to power, but we're going to educate people about what libertarianism is. Education ain't going to do it. Politics ain't going to do it. We know education ain't going to do it because I know of at least 40 or 50 hardcore free market PhD economists who have pretty much government-controlled, government-managed, government-unionized, protected, and tenured positions. So even if we got everyone a PhD in free market economics, we still couldn't get them to take their noses out of the status trough. So educating people is not going to get them to stop wanting government. They sent all the Tea Party. All the Tea Partiers went to Washington with that Coke-infused small government money, and what did they do? Stuck their nose in the trough pretty much balls deep as soon as they got there. And nobody's been able to get them out since. So let's just recognize it is
balls deep in the trough. Was that a balls deep in the trough?
Yeah, it means they put their head in the trough and they pretty much go to their waist into the trough. They just leave enough of their feet out that they can be pulled out to go out and re-elect, so they can go back in. Yeah.
Okay, just checking. Stefan Molyneux does not mix metaphors, ladies and gentlemen.
No, I really just said.
All right, so we have the third party debate tonight. Stefan, we've got Gary Johnson, Jill Stein, the Green Party. What do you think is the significance of this particular conversation? What does it represent?
Boy, I don't. It gives people a chance to analyze things that are never going to be achieved. It gives people a chance to laugh at ludicrous theories. It gives people a chance to pretend that they're praying to Thor and achieving human freedom.
What are some of those ludicrous theories?
Well, okay, doesn't the Green Lady wants to have she has a platform where she's going to provide a job to every able-bodied American?
Mm-hmm.
unless she has an enormously big garden that needs weeding, I don't really know how she's going to do that except by using force or printing money or borrowing. So this is a completely fascistic state of affairs. I believe that Gary Johnson, who, in many ways, of course, is more libertarian even than Ron Paul, he wants to, up to 23% sales tax to replace all the other taxes that go on.
That's interesting. Hold on. More libertarian than Ron Paul. You got to define libertarian and then justify that, because I think most people in the movement, certainly most in our audience, have been of the mind that at least Ron's philosophical grounding would make him a voluntarist. He is a voluntarist, at least self-proclaimed, and his policies seem to be the best possible way to move towards voluntarism, based on his opinion and his understanding of government. But Gary Johnson, not there. How do you make the case that he's more libertarian?
Well, I would say around the abortion issue, I would say that around the immigration issue, that he's probably a little bit more on the libertarian aspect. Because remember, there's what Ron Paul says on the Freedom Bus, right? And then there's what Ron Paul has to say to everyone else, right? I mean, and so the sort of voter-facing Ron Paul has some stickiness around some libertarian issues, to my knowledge, and Gary Johnson has less. But the fundamental thing, of course, is that they both still wanted to find ways to fund government, and neither of them are making the exquisitely simple moral case that taxation is force, that printing money is theft and counterfeiting, that borrowing money is enslaving the unborn, which even the ancient slavers had the civility to not do. And so they're not able to make the moral case, and therefore they have to try and make some sort of pragmatic cause and effect argument. The economy will be better off. Well, no, it won't. Not for a whole bunch of people. If you got a real free market tomorrow, probably a third of the population would fall into an economic hole that they may spend years or forever or never trying to get out of. So because they can't make that fundamental moral argument to the general population that we have turned into a blood-soaked ping-pong ball playing with eyeballs team of cannibals, turning on each other, attempting to turn the swords and guns of the state on each other, and selling off our children for the sake of a food stamp in the here and now, that we've turned into this utterly heinous and cannibalistic society, which has to be stopped, because even if you're not religious, we can all go with thou shalt not steal. They can't make that fundamental moral argument. So the only argument they can really make is, well, let's return to the past, or let's have a smaller government, let's have more opportunity, let's have a slightly better economy or a much better economy. These are all arguments from effect, but unfortunately there are so many people who are tied into the government system and have adapted themselves like exquisitely detailed parasites to the existing government system, that attempting to change it is going to create howls of protest, like firing a cannon full of stakes into a vampire convention. So it is just going to be a horrendous change. Nobody should think it's going to be any different. And if we don't have a moral cause with which to make that change, people aren't going to accept it. People will accept incredible suffering for a moral cause they believe in, even if it's not true, like fighting Nazis or whatever, right? But if they don't have a moral cause, then they go for the argument from effect, and the argument from effect basically says, I'll get mine however I can. And so neither of them, I think, can consistently make that moral case. And so they're just not going to be enough of a leaders to change the world the way it needs to be changed.
So, we are paying attention to this because we are of the mind, even as anarchists watching this debate, of the belief that it is important, that it is something that affects society, and that there will be some outcome that is significant one way or another. If Obama wins, going into a second term is different than being in his first term. If it's Romney, there will be a direction of policy change because he represents a slightly different class of special interest, or a different collection of various superclass interests that have been able to sponsor him and get behind him. Do you think that there's anything we have to look forward to as libertarians in one way or in one outcome or the other? Is there someone like we should at least be hoping for? Like if even if it's on the scale of well, if Romney's president, then maybe the left will wake up and we'll have an anti-war movement again, even though there will probably be less people dying overseas.
Well, I mean, historically, entitlement spending goes up faster under Republicans than it does under Democrats. So if you want a bigger government, vote Romney. I mean, that's the way it goes. Historically, there has been the belief... Sorry, go ahead.
Because they get away with more, think they can get away with more big government when it sounds like small government, and people buy that rhetoric.
Yeah, and also because the Democrats are in opposition and don't fight them. right? I mean, the government has a logic all in and of itself. I mean, the political leaders are like a little tiny ant riding that big giant honking stone ball at the beginning of Indiana Jones. They can lean one way or the other, but ain't going to make a whole bit of difference. The logic of the system is unfolding based upon contracts, decisions, and everything that was set up generations ago. It's just on its last legs, rolling its way forward. 8 minutes before Jerry Garcia dies, it doesn't really matter if you ask him to put down that third cheeseburger. He was done years ago, right? It's just a matter of waiting. But the one thing that will happen if Romney gets in is because we live in this bizarre propagandized planet world where language is just another government program. People believe somehow that when Romney talks about the free market, that Romney is involved with, associated with, or understands the free market at all, which he doesn't. And so what happens is, because people believe the rhetoric, I don't want anybody associated with the free market or with smaller government or anything. I don't want anyone like that anywhere near the reins of power when the horse jumps off the cliff, or rather.
Well, are you saying that Romney doesn't understand it, or that he understands it and he's playing it? Because that's an important distinction. There might be limits to his understanding, certainly, but I think for the most part, he knows what he's doing. Like, he's not unintelligent.
Well, I mean, intelligence doesn't have anything to do with it. I mean, because it's really around fundamental principles. Anybody who understood the free market would not have introduced Obamacare to Massachusetts.
Well, a politician who understands how to pervert the free market in his own interest.
Oh, okay. So, you mean he understands the free market the way that a torturer understands the human nervous system? Yeah, okay. But
right, exactly.
That's not exactly what we want in power, right? But no, because when the system really goes to hell in a handbasket, we don't want any of the Republicans anywhere near the presidency, because even though they do grow government faster than the Democrats in many ways, and even though Romney has clearly stated that he wants to increase the goddamn military budget. I mean, this man is a psychopath. I mean, this is evil. I mean, he is just a pretty fire-breathing Ken doll of, blandness and evil. And so he wants to increase the America's military budget. I mean, and so just don't have anybody associated with the free market near the reins of power, because what did they say? What do they still say about George Bush? Oh, you see, the financial crisis occurred because there was all this deregulation under George Bush, and he was such a free market, and he just said the banks should all regulate themselves. And Jesus, God in heaven, they're still talking about the free market being responsible for the 1929 crash, and socialism and war saving capitalism. Yeah, so let's not give them any more ammo for these, horrifying fairy tales they use to choke the living crap out of the next generation. So, I don't really think it matters in any practical sense who wins, but from a allegory fairy tale building sense, it has some small impact. I mean, anyone who believes in the process after we went from George Bush to Obama, I mean, I made this podcast in a video in 2008 just saying, okay, look, we have about as big a change as you could possibly get. A guy who came from a single mom in Kenya and a guy who was raised in the political oligarchy heart and center soul of the Death Star empire, and a guy who's more on the left and anti-colonial, and a guy who's more on the right and supposedly pro-free market, a guy whose leading influences were communists and heavy-duty socialists, and another guy whose leading influences were Ronald Reagan and Hayek and so on. We have a massive change in the presidency between Bush and Obama. There's never been a bigger change, to my knowledge, in any political system ever throughout history than between Bush and Obama. And what changed?
Chad, do you have a question for Stefan?
No.
Eddie?
I wanted to ask Stefan, but, Adam had mentioned, possibly the anti-war movement being re-energized if Romney is put into office. Now, wouldn't that be a better thing? I mean, maybe we would end up seeing less suffering in the Middle East?
Well, but if you want the anti-war movement to be energized, then you need to drive government spending as quickly as possible. I mean, the anti-war movement is energized when the government runs out of money and has to close its bases. This is what happens to all empires. Look at England after the Second World War, closed down the whole empire. If you look at Russia after the fall of communism, closed down the whole empire. What freed the average Roman citizen from about 2 decades worth of being conscripted into a hellish army with no antibiotics? The Roman Empire ran out of money. And so the anti-war movement isn't going to mean dipshit nothing. I mean, it's a fart in the wind. The anti-war movement is the anti-war movement, so to speak, is only going to happen when the American empire runs out of money. I mean, this is Al-Qaeda's plan, is what they've argued for. They did it to Russia and freed up Eastern Europe, and they're going to do it. They're doing it again to America, and they're going to free up all of the areas where America currently has its a horrible squid-soaked hegemony. So the anti-war movement, people can go out and protest all they want. It doesn't matter. I mean, the biggest anti-war movement in the world occurred at the beginning of the Iraq War, and it didn't mean a damn thing. The empire will end when the money runs out to pay the soldiers, and that's all that history teaches.
So you're saying this goes back to you can protest all you want as long as you can pay your taxes, as long as the empire can fund itself, as long as they can print money, as long as they can borrow money, as long as they can put money behind war, there will be conflict.
Yeah, for sure.
Ellie?
Someone from the chat asks, so what you're saying, Stefan, is elect Republicans so they can run up the debt and the left will complain.
Well, maybe that person missed the opening statement about voting as a whole. But no, don't vote. It's a Stockholm syndrome. It's begging a God that doesn't exist for a mercy that will never come. Don't vote, because it is a system of coercion. It's not immoral to vote. You're not going out there shooting someone, but you are involving yourself in a system of coercion. And you are begging against all historical evidence and all moral inevitability. You are begging sociopaths, psychopaths, and torturers to give you a break. Well, you know what happens when you show somebody who's really cruel what you want? They will use it against you. If you want freedom, at least you can get an hour's worth of freedom by not going to vote. But don't show them that you expect it to come through them. They will simply use that. So people say, well, we want to be free of the government. And the Republicans are like, ooh, okay, they want to be free of the government. Fantastic. Let's talk about smaller government. And that way, they will come and support us in wanting to be free of government, right? Don't show them your needs. I mean, it's like showing to a torturer, it really hurts when you tap right here. That's the thing that hurts me the most. So what's he going to do? It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess I know where to tap. I mean, just don't show them your need. Don't get exposed. Don't show your preferences to these people. We're just going to have to grit our teeth and lay the foundations for what comes next.
And what is that?
Freedom! Well, what comes next is, like any addict, if you don't learn through reason, you have to learn through experience. If if the intervention doesn't work and you're a drug gambling sex addict or whatever, then you just have to wake up with 3 bodies and a hooker's panties on your head in a ditch outside Vegas, not knowing where the hell you are. And then maybe you'll say, maybe I should lay off the blow and gambling and hookers or whatever. So, we have a society that has steadfastly refused to listen to reason, and so unfortunately they're going to have to be clubbed by the cudgels of experience, and then they'll shake their heads, and cooler and more reasonable heads will prevail.
You don't think that's going to be, for the average human being, a more peaceful transition as the state is just slowly rendered obsolete, maybe chunk by chunk? We look forward technologically and see what's coming. We're about to see the 3D printer revolution. So many exponential growth curves of human development are about to, start getting to the vertical asymptote. You don't think that's going to be a more powerful force than even any conscientious direction of society in reaction to a particularly bad experience with government?
Well, governments don't tend to slowly get smaller, right? They're like pimples. They grow and so they tend not to shrink in a slow period. I mean, there's some managed, right? So Canada cut like 20% of its government in the 90s because it was just paying 40 cents on the dollar in national debt, just on interest. So there is some managed stuff. That's not the case in America, because you have the military-industrial complex, and you have the prison-industrial complex, and you have the medical state complex. So there's a lot of stuff that's different. But, it's important to remember that society is not the government, right? I mean, we all understand this. That society is the opposite of government. And government is the opposite. Society is that which is voluntary and chosen, and government is that which is enforced and violence. But I repeat myself. But remember, over a third of the world's economy operates outside of governments. right? A government is just like it's just half the zoo, and the rest of it is, the zoo. Half the zoo is cages, and the other half of the zoo is just a forest. You can do whatever you want, so to speak. And so, when you're looking at least a third, and some estimates go even higher than that, at least a third of the world's economy is just people doing their thing outside of regulations, outside of taxation, outside of government control, outside of government courts and precedents and contracts and punishments and torts and all that and suing. And so the society is already laying the foundations for statelessness by existing to a large degree statelessness already. And so it's not like there'll be nothing there'll be nothing there if the government shrinks considerably. It's all those parallel mechanisms will simply rush in to take their place. Right? If you yank a big rock out of the water, it's not like the water continues to go around the hole, right? I mean, something rushes in to fill it, and there's lots of stuff already there that's been refined for many decades and fine-tuned for many decades and is working beautifully. That can come in and deal with these receding state functions.
Now, we're very excited to be having you back on. Oh,
that's my goodbye.
You just lost sound there. What? Was the sound lagging, or I saw his mouth is moving and the sound stopped, and then the sound came on. Anyway, Stefan,
I've been working on that trick.
What? All right, so we're having a few connection issues here, but I just want to say
He's fucking with you.
Thanks, Stefan. Maybe we won't have him back on Friday. No, Stefan, we're very excited to have you back on Friday. And there's a way that you have of presenting these issues that really shows an incredible intellectual rigor and having thought things out. And in doing so, you really invite people to ask the questions, and most of us in the room are familiar with your work, and I think a number of people in our audience are as well. But when you come back on Friday, I think Ali here, who's our new co-host, wanted to get into universally preferable behavior, which is really the foundational work. I mean, you're an incredible electronic book. It's available for free, freedomainradio.com. How is it that is able to give you such a framework to develop everything else in the way that you look at the world as a libertarian?
Was that just a question for me or a general comment?
Well, no. How do you? Well, give us a tease for what we're going to be talking about Friday. Aside from the one other request we have from the chat room, because someone wanted to call you out along the lines as I got to do a few months ago around the subject of martial arts. Yeah, Stefan Molyneux versus Kokesh cage match coming up this Friday via Skype.
Cat noises. I'm going to show you. I only have one ab, but I will show you. I will show you that ab.
Okay, so as far as ethics go, look, I mean, historically, society has organized itself around getting people to do good stuff, to be moral, to be good, either through threatening them with jail or threatening them with hell, or promising them heaven or letting them not be in jail or whatever. And that sucks. That's a terrible, terrible way of getting people to be good. And so in the absence of a really rigorous and solid philosophical justification for virtue, for goodness, for doing all that tasty crumpets of ethical goodness, we have to fall back on just pointing guns at people or pretending we're going to hurl them down into the everlasting pits of hell. So, of course, I've spent many years working on a theory of ethics that can be used to make the case irrevocably and universally and irrefutably for ethics. And if people, of course, accept and understand this, then we have a scientific method for ethics. And once you have a scientific method, you don't need religious wars anymore. And fundamentally, if you count the state as another kind of religion, which it is, all ethics has been religious warfare throughout history. We don't have a scientific method for ethics yet. I've been working like hell on that. I think it's stood up pretty well. I'll be happy to talk about it on Friday. That ends the religious warfare and moves us to an age of reason, I hope.